Okay, I was not expecting that last chapter. If you have not listened to chapter 7, part 5 yet, do not listen to this one. Go back and listen to part 5. Some pretty shocking turn of events. All right, now's your chance. Back out before you hear anything you don't want to hear or you can't unhear. All right, so Bod is in the house where his family lived back when they were murdered, and he is there with Mr. Frost, who just reached into the floorboards in Bod's old room, his old nursery. "We know he has dark hair," said Bod, in the room that had once been his bedroom, "and we know that his name is Jack." Mr. Frost put his hand down into the empty space where the floorboards had been. It's been almost 13 years, he said, and hair gets thin and goes gray in 13 years. But yes, that's right. It's Jack. He straightened up. The hand that had been in the hole in the floor was now holding a large, sharp knife. "Now," said the man Jack. "Now, boy, time to finish this." Bod stared at him. It was as if Mr. Frost had been a coat or a hat the man had been wearing that he had now discarded. The affable exterior had gone. The light glinted on the man's spectacles and on the blade of the knife. A voice called up to them from further down the stairs, Scarlet's. "Mr. Frost, there's someone knocking at your door. Should I get it?" The man Jack only glanced away for a moment, but Bod knew that the moment was all he had, and he faded as completely, as utterly as he could. The man Jack looked back to where Bod had been, then stared around the room, puzzlement and rage competing on his face. He took a step further into the room, his head swinging from side to side like an old angry tiger scenting prey. "You're here somewhere," growled the man Jack. "I can smell you." Behind him, the little door to the attic bedroom slammed closed, and as he swung around, he heard the key turn in the lock. The man Jack raised his voice. "It buys you moments, but it won't stop me, boy," he called through the locked door, then added simply, "We have unfinished business, you and I." Bod threw himself down the stairs, bouncing into the walls, almost tumbling headlong in his rush to reach Scarlet. "Scarlet," he said when he saw her. "It's him! Come on!" "It's who? What are you talking about?" "Him! Frost! He's Jack! He tried to kill me!" A bang from the man Jack kicking at the door. "But," Scarlet tried to make sense of what she was hearing, "but he's nice." "No," said Bod, grabbing her arm and pulling her down the stairs into the hallway. "No, he's not." Scarlet pulled open the front door. "Ah, good evening, young lady," said the man at the door, looking down at her. "We are looking for Mr. Frost. I believe this is his neck of the woods." He had silver-white hair, and he smelled of cologne. "Are you friends of his?" she asked. "Oh, yes," said a smaller man standing just behind. He had a small black mustache and was the only one of the men to wear a hat. "Certainly are," said a third, a younger man, huge and Nordic blonde. "Every man Jack of us," said the last of the men, wide and bull-like, with a massive head. His skin was brown. Mr. Frost, he had to go out," she said. "But his car's here," said the white-haired man, as the blonde one said, "Who are you, anyway?" "He's a friend of my mum," said Scarlet. She could see Bod now on the other side of the group of men, gesturing frantically to her to leave the men and follow him. She said, as breezily as she could, "He just popped out for a newspaper from the corner shop down there," and she closed the door behind her, stepped around the men, and began to walk away. "Where are you going?" asked the man with the mustache. "I've got a bus to catch," she said. Scarlet walked up the hill towards the bus stop and the graveyard, and resolutely did not look back. Bod walked beside her. Even to Scarlet he seemed shadowy in the deepening dusk. like something that was almost not there, a shimmer of heat haze, a skittery leaf that for a moment had seemed to be a boy. "Walk faster," said Bod. "They're all looking at you, but don't run." "Who are they?" asked Scarlet quietly. "I don't know," said Bod, "but they all felt weird, like they weren't properly people. I want to go back and listen to them." "Of course they're people," said Scarlet, and she walked up the hill as fast as she could without actually running, no longer certain Bod was by her side. The four men stood at the door to number 33. "I don't like this," said the big man with the bull neck. "You don't like this, Mr. Tar," said the white-haired man. "None of us like it. All wrong. Everything's gone wrong. Krakow's gone. They aren't answering. And after Melbourne and Vancouver," said the man with the mustache. "For all we know, we four are all that's left." "Quiet, please, Mr. Ketch," said the white-haired man. "I'm thinking." "Sorry, sir," said Mr. Ketch, and he patted his mustache with one gloved finger, looked up the hill and down again, and whistled through his teeth. "I think we should go after her," said the bull-necked man, Mr. Tar. "I think you people should listen to me," said the white-haired man. "I said quiet, and what I meant was quiet." "Sorry, Mr. Dandy," said the blond man. They were quiet. In the silence they could hear thumping sounds coming from high inside the house. "I'm going in," said Mr. Dandy. "Mr. Tar, you're with me. Nimble and Ketch, get that girl. Bring her back." "Dead or alive?" asked Mr. Ketch with a smug smile. "Alive, you moron," said Mr. Dandy. "I want to know what she knows." "Maybe she's one of them," said Mr. Tar, "the ones who's done for us in Vancouver and Melbourne and—" "Get her!" said Mr. Dandy. "Get her now!" The blond man and the hat and mustache hurried up the hill. Mr. Dandy and Mr. Tar stood outside the door to number 33. "Force it," said Mr. Dandy. Mr. Tar put his shoulder against the door and began to lean his weight on it. "It's reinforced," he said. "Protected." Mr. Dandy said, "Nothing one Jack can do that another can't fix." He pulled off his glove, put his hand against the door, muttered something in a language older than English. "Now try it," he said. Tar leaned against the door, grunted, and pushed. This time the lock gave and the door swung open. "Nicely done," said Mr. Dandy. There was a crashing noise from far above them, up at the top of the house. The man Jack met them halfway down the stairs. Mr. Dandy grinned at him, without any humor, but with perfect teeth. "Hello, Jack Frost," he said. "I thought you had the boy." "I did," said the man Jack. "He got away." "Again?" Jack Dandy's smile grew even chillier and even more perfect. "Once is a mistake, Jack. Twice is a disaster." "We'll get him," said the man Jack. "This ends tonight." "It had better," said Mr. Dandy. "He'll be in the graveyard," said the man Jack. The three men hurried down the stairs. The man Jack sniffed the air. He had the scent of the boy in his nostrils, a prickle at the nape of his neck. He felt like all this had happened years before. He paused, pulled on his long black coat, which had hung in the front hall, incongruous beside Mr. Frost's tweed jacket and fawn mackintosh. The front door was open at the street, and the daylight had almost gone. This time the man Jack knew exactly which way to go. He did not pause, but simply walked out of the house and hurried up the hill towards the graveyard. A couple things I've noticed this chapter. The names of these people. Mr. Frost, who we were to call J for Jack, is named Jack Frost. And one of these other men is named Jack Dandy, and I think another one was Mr. Tar, Jack Tar, and another one Jack Ketch. I think these are all references to like Jack Frost, Jack Dandy, all the different Jacks that come up in sayings, phrases, ideas, stories. And then another thing I noticed earlier, when the man Jack was still Mr. Frost, he said something that kind of gave it away. Not gave it away, but like was a hint. He said, trying to find it. He said something about time and tide, which is an old expression. Time and tide wait for no man. And if you want to make a point that something is inevitable, is going to happen, whether you like it or not, you say time and tide. And earlier in the story at that convocation, I want to go back to that. At the convocation, where is it? A couple things at that convocation. Again, it was San Francisco. That came up again. So that's another place where this has all been happening, where the honor guard has been apparently fighting the jacks of all trades, or the every man jack of us, whatever they are. I can't find it. I'm gonna keep looking for just a minute. Time's a ticking. We're none of us getting any younger. Time's a ticking. 10 years. Oh, yeah, okay. So one of the other men Jack says, 10 years, he said. Time and tide wait for no man. The babe will soon be grown, and then what? So that made me think when Mr. Frost said time and tide, it made me think back to that, which is a great trick that authors use when they, they don't want to give everything away, but they throw little hints in there that you can, if you're paying close attention, you might notice. All right, back to where I was. I think we're arriving at the climax. The graveyard gates were closed when Scarlet reached them. Scarlet pulled at them desperately, but the gates were padlocked for the night, and then Bod was beside her. "Do you know where the key is?" she asked. "We don't have time," said Bod. He pushed close to the metal bars. "Put your arms around me." "You, what?" "Just put your arms around me and close your eyes." Scarlet stared at Bod as if daring him to try something. Then she held him tightly and screwed her eyes shut. "Okay." Bod leaned against the bars of the graveyard gates. They counted as part of the graveyard, and he hoped that his freedom of the graveyard might possibly, just this time, cover other people too. And then, like smoke, Bod slipped through the bars. "You can open your eyes," he said. She did. "How did you do that?" "This is my home," he said. "I can do things here." The sound of shoes slapping against the pavement, and two men were on the other side of the gates, rattling them, pulling at them. "Hello," said Jack Ketch with a twitch of his mustache, and he smiled at Scarlet through the bars like a rabbit with a secret. He held a black silk cord tied around his left forearm, and now he was tugging at it with his gloved right hand. He pulled it off his arm and into his hand, testing it, running it from hand to hand as if it was about to make a cat's cradle. "Come on out, girlie. It's all right. No one's going to hurt you." "We just need you to answer some questions," said the big blond man, Mr. Nimble. Jack B. Nimble. We're on official business," he lied. There was nothing official about the Jacks of all trades, although there had been Jacks in governments and in police forces and in other places besides. "Run," said Bod to Scarlet, pulling at her hand. She ran. "Did you see that?" said the Jack they called Ketch. "What?" "I saw somebody with her. A boy." "The boy?" asked Jack B. Nimble. Asked the Jack called Nimble. "How would I know? Here, give me a hand up." The bigger man put his hands out, linked them to make a step. Jack Ketch's black-clad foot went into it, lifted up. He scrambled onto the top of the gates and jumped down to the drive, landing on all fours like a frog. He stood up, said, "Find another way in. I'm going after them." And he sprinted off up the winding path that led into the graveyard. That's where I got to stop. My time has come to an end. Oh, all kinds of exciting stuff happening here.